Hello again, fancy folks. Welcome to another LuxeSci interview. Today we are talking with Nick Gaunt. Did I say your last name correctly?
You did, yes. Yeah,
Good.
go on.
Just always like to check. Founder, director, and CEO of Acorn Scientific Marketing. Nick has a bachelor's in science in chemistry and a master's in science in nanotechnology from the University of Central
Lancashire, yeah.
Lancashire. Okay. Oh, so close. And a PhD in agrochemistry to bolster food security from the University of Exeter. From his PhD, Nick joined Notch Communications, a sci-tech marketing agency, and eventually moved to freelance, starting his own marketing agency, Acorn Scientific Marketing. So Nick, can you tell us a little bit more about your journey from the bench into marketing and all about Acorn and what your goals are with your organization?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me on. I'm always the host. I'm never the interviewed on podcasts, so this is lovely. So yes, like you've nicely summarized for me, I moved from being a pure bench chemist. I think I'd rather class myself as a chemist rather than anything else. My PhD is physics-ish, but I would not say I'm a physicist in the slightest. And I think my PhD supervisor would probably agree. So yes, I moved into the wonderful world of marketing, and I think the fantastic thing that I've been able to do is stay pretty much on the front line of all of this fantastic varied innovation all over the place. But I haven't had to get my hands dirty, and that's the thing that I always say. Like I didn't enjoy being in a lab, potentially getting chemicals on me. Smelly chemistry was not my thing. I very much liked the broad thinking, the new technologies, things like that. So once I finished my PhD, I was very much set on leaving that whole area and moving into something a little bit different, which is why I ended up in the marketing side as a scientific writer. And then I've grown from there and written for quite a few people. Yeah, so a lot of it was ghostwriting in the early days, and now I'm able to sort of use my own voice and put my own name to it a little bit more, which is quite nice.
And so Acorn Scientific Marketing, what is your kind of area? Who are you looking to speak to? Who are you looking to attract as customers?
So the first set of people that we were very much interested in looking after were scientific spin-out startups and academic groups. Mm-hmm. So the ones that really need that help straight away. It's easy to make a big impact with a company that's got a huge marketing budget or something like that. So we wanted to be, and I say we because I work with my dad, so I'm in the unique position of having hired my own dad, which is quite nice.
That's
we've
lovely.
talked about it for ages working together, and this business together started to work, and I managed to persuade him in leaving his position of about, I think it was 37 years he worked for a company. So I managed to persuade him to come and work for me. I think I'm a nicer boss. But yeah, so Acorn, we have a really good wide range of companies that we cater to. So we do all of we do podcasts for companies, we do writing of blogs and articles and things like that. And we can spread way across everywhere. As you said in my nice intro, which was lovely, I've got quite a varied background. I've gone from chemistry to physics through nanotechnology and agrochemistry and things like that. So I've got quite a nice round basis to move forward from. And the same can be said for my dad, Tim. He's a nutritionist, a health food person, and yeah, he's got his finger in many pies. I've got my finger in many different pies. So bringing that all together, we really can make a difference to a lot of different fields. And that's what we've seen so far. Tons of different areas, tons of different countries, and the business is not even 2 years old yet. And
you're smashing it. I've seen you've gotten awards. You're doing your featured podcast featured on BBC. It's awesome.
Yeah, there's at the time of recording, I've got in about a week and a half, I've got 2 more awards coming up. So maybe I'll be able to add in a little insert here for 2 more awards for Acorn. So we're doing really well with it, and it's sort of taken off a lot quicker than I thought, which is really nice.
Well, congrats. That's all awesome. And I think really needed to help scientists think about what their work is and what it does, and in a way that is a little bit more approachable than writing it up in a scientific journal, because that's
for sure.
Super dry.
I've said it for ages that scientists are so clever at at knowing a thing, but they are, as a whole, this is a huge generalization of scientists. We can't communicate.
No.
Um, we sit in a potentially a huge office shared, whilst you're doing your PhD, you share an office with 40 other people, maybe,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you don't talk to them, you don't explain your work. I finished my PhD. I had no idea what the guy sat next to me actually did
Oh
on a
no.
day-to-day basis. So changing that and making sure that your science doesn't have to speak for itself.
Hmm.
You can use tools. I mean, everybody now uses social media for
Yeah.
everything. If you've done a paper, put it out on social media,
Hmm.
join the right LinkedIn groups to promote your group and
Yeah.
promote your work and things like that. So it's the simple things you can do, or hire me
Yeah.
and I'll help.
Yeah. See, there you go. You could take the easy route and hire you. Yeah. I was just
Yeah.
thinking that even I think scientists are even encouraged not to communicate in a certain way. I remember having battles with my advisor on like how I wrote and what the titles I wanted of my papers I wanted to be. And it was a little bit more commercial or everyday than the science. And he would be like, "No, Alexis." And I'm like, but it's so
Mhm.
boring.
Yeah. I feel exactly the same way. There was a couple of papers that I wrote were instantly sort of like, no, we
Yeah.
can't say anything like this because you
Yes.
you write in a so, you're using too many superlatives.
Yes.
You're trying to be too creative with it. The journals won't go for it. And it's like,
No.
well, change the journals then.
I know. Yeah. It's not until you're like way up in your career and you get to write some review article that you can be kind of creative with something.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I actually reposted something the other week. Somebody had found and collected and sort of collated this wonderful list of funnily named article titles.
Yes.
I did repost it. I can't think of any of them off the top of my head, but they were really good.
Yeah. Some
And
of
I can
them.
appreciate the humor that they have, they've worked so hard into
Yes.
putting into that. And so
Yeah.
I try and do that. Every single article that I write, it's there's funny subtitles, there's alliteration all over the place, and
Mhm.
adding fun and creativity to science is what's needed.
Yeah, because the whole kind of basis for this podcast was to kind of capture that wonder that you have as a kid with science. Like science used to be fun. Like when you're a kid, science
Mhm.
is fun and it's exciting and it's interesting and it can still be all of that if we inject some of that wording and some of that kind of almost a culture back into it, so it's not so dry and jargony.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree. Yeah.
What luxury item did you choose and why?
So I chose chocolate, and
Mm,
I did question it with you whether it was considered luxury enough, because there is obviously luxury brands all over the place in everything, but
yeah.
because of the commercialization, the globalization of
Mm.
ingredients, things like that, is it still considered a luxury item? So, yes, I chose chocolate, and I chose chocolate because I feel like I may have ingested more chocolate than anyone else ever. Um,
I don't know. I think
I
maybe
used
some
to
listeners are gonna challenge you on that
have,
one.
I used to have chocolate spread sandwiches pretty much every day.
Oh wow.
I was a very picky eater, and for a long time now I'm cured. I'm able to eat other things than chocolate, but it is still a definite weakness for me.
Oh, I agree. Chocolate is good. And I do agree that it's a luxury item. I think that that's how it started. Not how it started, but how it started in the European culture was very much a luxury item and reserved for very wealthy or royalty. And I think even today, even though it's very vastly commercially available, really good chocolate is, I think, still a luxury.
Yeah, I made myself a little list of very expensive chocolates, and can confirm there's still some brands out there that are stupidly
Yes.
expensive and therefore luxury.
Yes. Yeah. Um, So, where do you want to start? I've got some history here with the
Hit me with the
chocolate.
history. Start
So,
at the start.
the cocoa tree has been used as food for the last 5,300 years, starting in a indigenous culture in Ecuador. That's where it started, and then moved up to the Mesoamerican cultures. And the cocoa beans come from the Theobroma cacao tree, which currently West Africa produces 81% of the world's crop. And there are three main varietals, the Forastero, the Criollo, and the Trinitario. None of which I think I said correctly, but there we go. what I thought was interesting is that the cocoa pod, right? So you take the seeds and you dry them and you ferment them, and that's what you make the chocolate out of, right? But the pod grows directly from the trunk or from a very large branch, kind of like a jackfruit. Like it doesn't grow off of a small twig or anything like that. And you can harvest them every couple of months. So it's not like an annual harvest, it's a continuing, ongoing harvest based on what's ripe at the time. I
Mm.
thought that was kind of interesting.
That is really interesting. Yeah, I did my own little research into some of the big points in chocolate's history,
Yeah.
particularly as a European man. But well, starting off for me, it was the fact that it used to not be any kind of luxury. It was everywhere. You know, the Mayans, they I think the reason we call it chocolate came from like an old Mayan drink called I think it's pronounced chocolat with two A's at the end.
Ah,
And that was like a mixture of cacao or cocoa beans. Actually, that's one of the questions I'm going to have for you later is what is the difference between cacao and cocoa beans and yeah, all of that bit. But yeah, cornmeal spices and cacao, and you know that they had that as like a hot beverage. They put all of that in some hot water,
hmm.
had it as a beverage for rituals, for medicine. You know, they fully believed in the healing properties of
Hmm.
what we now have as chocolate. But yeah, and then moving on from that, you know, Europe really got it in the 1800s.
Yeah.
That was where some of the big names came to play as well. So you got like Nestle and Lindt at some point
Yeah.
inventing. So we had Dutch inventions, British engineers, then the big boys came to play, and obviously Nestle and Lindt, well, Nestle especially, are the
Yeah.
most commercial chocolate company in the world, I'd say. I haven't looked at the numbers, but
I don't know, Mars, I might have something to say about that.
yeah, maybe. They're definitely in competition. They're up there. They're in the
They are.
conversation, sure.
And both have expanded to not just chocolate, right? Like, I don't know if they both started with chocolate, but they're now multi-conglomerate, baby food, pet food. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's fingers in many pies for Nestle, especially. I think Lindt stayed very much in the chocolate game. I've never seen Lindt pet
No,
food.
no, but Mars owns, aside from a multitude of candy manufacturing, Mars owns several pet food companies. They're really into like animal welfare and things like that.
Well, that's quite nice to give back, especially from a company that their main product does kill animals.
Yeah, yeah. Chocolate's not good for dogs. We'll get into
No, it
that.
isn't. We'll get that out of the way straight away.
Yeah, do not feed. And I guess, I think it's pretty well known, especially amongst dog owners, that you should not give your dog chocolate. And I'm wondering if you have a cat or a bunny or any, is it just across the board, don't give your pet candy, probably?
I'm not too sure. I know that the toxic thing, especially for dogs, I've never heard anybody say don't give chocolate to a cat as much as I've heard people say don't give chocolate to a dog. So maybe that deserves more research. And I'm definitely not saying feed your cat chocolate as an experiment for this podcast, but
No, no. But
it's all about the theobromine in chocolate, so that I know for a fact that dogs have much slower metabolism for it, and so
mm,
unfortunately, it just speeds up their heart
yeah.
really
So what
quickly.
is theobromine?
Oof! I wish I could tell you a little bit more about theobromine and its effects, and but yeah, it's not something that I could reel off a bunch of facts for you on.
Oh, it's the principal alkaloid of the bean. So it's an alkaloid, kind of along the lines of caffeine, actually.
Was also don't give your dog caffeine then.
Oh, coffee. Yeah. So it says that it's responsible for like a bitter taste in the chocolate.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's present. I know it's present in the cacao bean
Mm.
itself. The difference that I understand between cacao and cocoa beans is the amount of processing that goes through them. I also know for a fact that one of my friends said that their dog got into some, you know, like a big box of celebrations or quality streets or something like that a long time ago and was perfectly fine from it.
Hmm.
Potentially because there's not as much theobromine in chocolate now, because there's not as much cacao in chocolate
Yeah.
now, because it's overly processed. added all of these different,
Mhm.
fats and acids and flavonoids as well.
I was just looking online, and the difference between theobromine and caffeine chemically is one extra methyl group on caffeine.
So they're very similar.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's,
it could be something to do with the entire chain, beforehand
yeah.
that really has an impact on the heart of, for now, I'm going to say dogs, but it's
Yes.
probably all small animals that have similar immune systems to
I also
mammals.
just feel like it's just probably not good practice to feed your small or any pet a lot of candy or chocolate or
Yeah,
anything along those
absolutely.
lines. Because
No,
there's
he
just,
does. My dog Barney, he does beg me for anything. You sit in front of me, and you could just be holding like a kitchen sponge, and he'll want to eat it because you're holding it in front of him. But yeah, he desperately wants to try chocolate, and I've not given him any.
that's good. What else caught your attention about chocolate?
If we're sticking around sort of the chemistry of chocolate, we can talk
Hmm.
about things like tryptophan and phenylethylamine, their impacts sort of on the. I say it's a myth because there isn't definitive proof on the aphrodisiac effect, and
Mm.
phenylethylamine is known as sort of the love drug, and it helps promote dopamine production in the brain, and it's linked to serotonin and things like that. So it helps with happiness, and people assume it helps with helping people fall in love. So it's one of the reasons why Valentine's Day, big heart-shaped box of chocolates.
Chocolate
That's
everywhere.
you know so because it's meant to help people fall in love and things like
Aw.
that. But unfortunately, I'm going to be the bearer of bad news. There's such a small amount of phenylethylamine. It's also known as PEA or P.
Mm.
But I don't really want to talk about PEA or P
Yeah,
food.
right,
Um,
right.
um,
Sounds like a health hazard, but
it does, doesn't it? I don't think there's enough of it in there to have any kind of effect. Plus, it's
Mm.
all broken down before it gets anywhere near the brain. So some other foods may have an actual aphrodisiac effect,
Yeah,
not chocolate,
watermelon
as
juice
far as the
was,
science. Yeah, as
yeah.
far as the science says.
There's some research out there about chocolate actually helping women in their during PMS, having a little bit of a boost during that time, which might be why a lot of women crave chocolate around that time. It might not be so much the actual chemistry as maybe you just eat a sweet treat.
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be boosts. I mean, surely it helps a little bit with your dopamine, so it might bring you back up a little bit. And yeah, there's the old Bridget Jones-esque stereotype of being broken up with and having a large bowl of chocolate ice cream or something like that. Maybe there's a placebo effect there,
Could
or
be.
something along those lines. But I'm not poo-pooing the whole idea.
Yeah, I think that the concept of sort of biologically relevant dose is really interesting, right? Especially with, you see a lot, or I see a lot, probably just my Instagram feed, of scientists trying to explain that, like, just because something's in something doesn't mean it's going to really impact you. Like, there is arsenic in apple seeds, or there's cyanide
Yeah.
in almonds. And, I think that this idea of like, what is a dose and what is a biologically important or active dose is really interesting. So you can say, okay, there's chemicals everywhere, and there's this, and you're just like, well, yeah, the world is made of chemicals, and also, the dose really matters when you're talking about exposures or impact or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a great example on another podcast that I listened to where one of the hosts could not believe that the iron that is in food is elementally the same type of iron that you'll see, lifting weights in the gym, that
Hmm.
kind of iron.
Yeah.
So, it's just a matter of how much, you're
Hmm.
talking, I couldn't tell you the actual amount of arsenic in an apple, but you're not going to
Yeah.
ingest all of that. It's not statistically significant amounts to
No.
make you fear for your life. Maybe if you had 100 apples a day, possibly, but
Possibly. Yeah. Dosing is really interesting. I mean, tangent terrible tangent, but we're going to go there anyway. I mean, you get the same sort of thing with radiation, right? So there can be a lot of kind of fear around radiation exposure, and yet people still fly in airplanes. And, you know, an airplane flight from the US to Europe could be the equivalent of anywhere from 30 to 50 chest X-rays exposure and radiation because you're so high up. We don't give it a thought.
No, so nobody really considers that. It's not written on a piece of paper that you're handed before the flight. So.
Put this lead apron on for your flight. I was super interested, and I'm sure you read about this. This was kind of all over the place about the Swiss scientists that came up with a new way to make chocolate. Did you see this?
Is this a recent one?
Yeah.
We've been making a lot of good chocolate for a long time.
Yeah, no, this is a recent one this year. And it has to do with, they make what's called a cocoa jelly, and they make it out of more of the pulp of the cocoa pod, the cacao pod, and some of the inner lining of the husk. So they're using more of the bean than just the seeds. It's naturally apparently really, really sweet. And so instead of putting a whole bunch of sugar in the chocolate, you can use these other components of the pod to make your chocolate sweet. And so they experimented a bunch, and they settled on about 20% of this cocoa jelly that resulted in 20% more fiber because you're using like the husk and things like that, and 30% less saturated fat in the resulting chocolate, which apparently tasted like dark chocolate. That's the flavor profile they're going for. And it helps the farmers too, because they can dry out the pulp in the husk and sell it as a powder along with the seeds to sweeten the chocolate. Because right now they use powdered sugar because you don't want to use granulated sugar because you don't want to change the texture of the chocolate. But you can use this cocoa jelly powder instead, and it's actually using more of the plant, which is always good when you're harvesting, and is a little bit more fiber in there, a little less fat. Might be kind of good.
Oh, that's fascinating. I hadn't read about that, but I'm always up for a taste test. So
I know I have to figure out where you can find
this. If that's in the podcast budget, then
yeah. We might have to actually contact the scientists on this one. I don't think it's commercially available. Yeah, I actually heard about it on. I have been for years and years a pretty regular listener to the BBC Global News podcast, and I think they try to put little like good news pieces in at the end to make you not so sad. So this is one of like their little.
It's a piece of good news to take away from all of this. Yeah.
Exactly. What else about chocolate do you find interesting?
Well, I did do a couple of little looks into the fanciest chocolates because I mentioned at the start that I didn't know if this really counted still as a luxury, seeing as, you know, there is so much chocolate now, and due to the globalization of all of these ingredients, it's difficult to tell what's a luxury and what's mass produced. Over here in England, we've got like every single supermarket has their own brand of chocolate, and you can tell that it's low quality. It's sold for, you know, pennies compared to some of the others.
Yeah. And
I wanted to find what is the most expensive chocolate in the world, and it is over in the States. It's an ex Wall Street guy. I've forgotten. I should have written that down.
So why am I not surprised?
Yeah, so he wanted to make the most luxurious chocolate in the world, and he made one called Toak. So TO''AK.
Oh God, and a terrible name too. Wall Street people need to stop naming things.
I can't agree or disagree with that. I will stay impartial, but so he has created a bar that uses Ecuadorian cocoa beans. And I think these Ecuadorian ones, you said at the start, this is where potentially chocolate was founded. So he's gone right to the source and got apparently the most luxurious, amazing cocoa beans, and has created a $700 or about, I think it's about 50 grams, just under 50 grams, 48 grams or something like that, 1.5 ounces for $700. So that is the most expensive one that I could find.
Wow.
If anyone else finds another one, let you know. And if anyone wants to send free samples, then
yeah,
I'm also
super keen.
It does bring into sort of question, though, whether luxury is luxury or luxury is just pricey, because the marketing really does matter.
Yes, it does.
For chocolate brands. And I think I sent you one before we started recording, to sort of being like full difference between some of them. So you get the adverts over here in England, we get the adverts for Lindt on TV, Lindor,
Oh,
and it's all sort of slow-mo, and it's like a master
yes.
chocolatier stirring this big pot of
Yeah.
velvet, and it's just it really sort of shows you this is something to savor.
Hmm.
Like, we're slowing it down to make the moment that you have our velvety chocolate, this is something to savor. It's not mass produced. I mean, it is, because lint is everywhere. And quite a lot of brands have done that. I remember many brands, sort of, a Galaxy do it now as well. And Galaxy is pretty much on the mass produced list when it comes to chocolate.
Yeah.
Particularly in the UK, and things like Milka as well in Europe. Some of the brands showcase their luxury in that way, whereas you have other brands that do the mass produced stuff, the Nestle's, the Mars, the one that we have over here, and I'm pretty sure you guys have Kit Kats over in America,
Oh,
don't
yeah.
you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have a break, have a Kit Kat.
Yeah.
Boom.
Done.
It's chocolate for the people. It's,
Yes.
just eat some chocolate.
Yeah.
That's it. It's the Nike tick of chocolate. Just do it. Just eat some. I think that's a great way of showcasing whether something is luxury
Hmm.
or for a purpose.
Yeah.
And Kit Kat is branding for a purpose.
Yeah.
Whether however much you want to eat, we'll do it.
Yeah, and I think that applies to almost all luxury items, to be honest. Like, you can say, look at the De Beers commercial. Like, De Beers has single-handedly made diamonds something aspirational and rare. And, they have this new campaign of, natural diamonds, like this came from the earth, right? Instead of from a lab, right? So
Yeah.
I think they are on the forefront of luxury marketing in terms of turning their product into something that people would covet, because you can get a lab-grown diamond and almost nobody can tell the difference. It is chemically exactly the same, and it is a lot cheaper, but there's this mythos around, it came from the earth and it was forged in fire, and all of that kind of stuff.
The world made this, not a scientist, therefore it's better. But
Right.
is
But
it really?
I don't know.
On
I
a
think, and
day-to-day
again, that
basis, is it really?
you do marketing, right? That's the value proposition of the
Sure.
customer, right? For some people, it is. For some people, like me, I think it would be super cool to like have a lab grown diamond, right? Like, that's awesome. You made that in a lab. Cool.
Yeah, yeah. To anybody that's interested in science, having something that a human has managed to invent and create, with their own two hands, for me is cooler than letting it sit in the earth for a billion years.
Yeah, whatever it was.
you know, to the consumer as a whole, that it's just the way it's sold. If the
Yeah.
marketing campaign had been different, and it's like, we were sick of waiting for the earth to do it, so we did it ourselves.
Hmm.
People be like, "Whoa, that's cool! Like,
Yeah.
I can buy that."
Yeah.
And if they put the price point way higher, people would have paid it for this exclusive item. But I
Hmm.
think that's one of the things with it coming out of the earth. It takes a long time for
Yes.
something to grow, and so you're getting you're getting a limited edition, whereas in a lab at some point in the future
Yeah.
they could be churning these out on the daily.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah. The exclusivity. And I think there is a little bit of that in chocolate. So one of my favorite places to go in New York City is Maison du Chocolat. It's a French chocolatier. There are not that many, right? So this is one of the few stores in the US. They do have really, really good chocolate, and more importantly, really, really good hot chocolate. Like that very rich, creamy French hot chocolate. So but there is this idea of exclusivity. Like, you have to go up to New York City, and there's like this whole kind of white glove experience when you're there, and they let you try, all, different. I tried a 90% cacao chocolate. That was interesting.
bitter, I'm sure.
Very bitter. There is this big marketing aspect of what makes something a luxury item. Because that is
Yeah,
just
yeah.
chocolate, and it's nicer chocolate, but
The
it is,
experience, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Like, at the end of the day, your chocolate experience is just that. It's an experience. And that's one of the things that the luxury brands do very well, is
yes,
they sell you basically the same chocolate as,
yeah,
Kit Kat, but they do it in such a different way that,
yeah.
you feel fancy doing it. And that's the whole point of the Blooming podcast, isn't
Is
it?
there in the UK? is there like a burgeoning small producer chocolate industry? So like we used to live in Seattle and there was a local chocolate maker and they did, they had a facility, a fairly big facility, and they would ship around the country, but they were very hyper local in how they did their ingredients. And you could go and see them make the chocolate. So I was just wondering if in the UK there's kind of like almost like microbreweries started popping up everywhere. You see like local chocolate popping anywhere.
Yeah, there's quite a few around Manchester. I mean, yeah, I'm based in Manchester, so I don't see everything that goes down in London. Everything starts in London, basically, and then I hear whispers of it. I've got a couple of friends that live down in London, and then anytime they come up and visit, they pay for their night at mine with some delicious new chocolates
There you go.
or cookies or something like that with their own homemade chocolates. But there's two that I can think of that are really, really good. And there's a brownie company around here. The most luxurious thing. Their boxes come and they're fantastic. It's
Mhm.
probably cost about £6 or £7 a brownie, but it's really worth it for me.
Yeah.
And that's one of my only luxurious outgoings is these brownies. The other one, there's a company up in Scotland, and I think there's quite a few up there that are trying to do free from chocolates, and get no dairy, no gluten, no everything.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's such a big movement with everything in
Yeah.
food. So my mum has now stopped having gluten and dairy and a couple of other things as well.
Mhm.
And a while ago, I found out that she absolutely loved, and I don't know what they're called. They're basically chocolate buttons, white chocolate buttons, with like some sprinkles on them. And they were one of her favorite treats as a young girl. I wanted to get some for her for Christmas, but all of them have a lot of dairy in,
Yeah.
especially with the white chocolate,
Yeah.
um, which we could come on to actually, because white chocolate isn't chocolate. There's no
I
cocoa
was going to
beans in
ask you because like I am like will die on this hill. It's not chocolate.
No, it's very much not chocolate. It's got some cocoa butter, yeah, some cocoa butter in it,
Butter. Yeah.
but there's none of the powder. I will happily die on that hill with you. It's not chocolate.
So did that company then did they make a
Yes.
version that your mom
Sorry.
could have? Yeah. No, no.
Return back to the point. I did some looking into trying to find some dairy-free versions of these buttons, and I really can't remember what they were called, but it was 80s England, so they probably called them like Fizzle Twigs or something like that. I don't know. If that's not already a brand of chocolate, I'm
It
claiming
should
that
be.
as my
Yeah.
Fizzle
Yeah.
Twigs.
Yeah.
Very English. Or yeah, sell them to all of your American friends.
Oh, everybody go crazy here. They're like, it's so British. Look at that. It's so cool.
But I suppose that's another thing I could come up to. There's a couple of British shops. I went to San Francisco a few years ago, and there's a
Mm.
British shop in there. Nothing in there is British.
Oh, it's like going to the American shops in other countries. You're like,
Oh yeah.
that was an interesting choice.
It just gets it so wrong. But yes, these buttons, I was able to find them, and they were quite luxury for what they were, because
Mhm.
they were essentially chocolate buttons with some sprinkles on. But
Yeah.
because of the presentation and the fact they were free from, therefore, anything free from is more
Oh,
expensive than
yeah.
they with
And you're like, but
with
you're
version.
taking ingredients out. Shouldn't it be
Yeah.
cheaper?
Well, I suppose again, it's the science, it's the master chocolatiers at work
Yeah.
replacing things and making sure things work. So you can
Yeah.
appreciate
Yeah.
the craftsmanship, and that was one of the things that I touched on earlier with the 1800s Britain, or 1800s Europe
Yeah.
was just a sea of people inventing and putting a lot of time into this. So
Mhm.
the master chocolatier needed to get paid quite a lot, and that's why the chocolate was so much back then.
Oh,
But
that's
now that
interesting.
we've got all of these, it's like a 9-step process to make yourself some chocolate,
Yeah.
and it's now probably far easier than it was back then because you can mass produce everything.
I have one bit of chocolate physics, interesting chocolate physics for you. There is a 3D printer for chocolate. So this engineer, she figured out a way to do it with chocolate. Device heats the chocolate just below body temperature for the extrusion, and then you just allow it to solidify in ambient air. What that means is that you're not actually tempering the chocolate. Tempering happens around 110 to 112 degrees Fahrenheit. And sorry, I don't know what that is in Celsius, but it's not body temperature. It's a lot higher.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get that sheen, that lovely sheen. Like the sheen that you see on chocolate is the tempering process that breaks down the sugar crystals, and then they kind of reassemble and shiny. But you can print anything. You can just go online because there's so many files for 3D printers that are free and open access. You can design your own and like a CAD software, and then you can just print it in chocolate. The chocolate itself is a little bit different. They use palm oil and not cocoa butter for the fat in the chocolate because it just works better with the whole extrusion process. You can buy one of these. You can buy one assembled, or you can buy a kit and assemble it yourself, and you can just print whatever chocolate shape floats your boat.
Glorious, but I can imagine.
So that is all I had about chocolate. Did we miss anything from your end? Any fun facts?
Yeah. I suppose the difference between cacao and cocoa was something that I wanted to learn a little bit more about.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. It seems to do with the processing, the amount of processing. Like the cacao is the raw pod and the bean, and the cocoa is kind of further down the process.
Because they still refer to it as like the cocoa bean. But I thought after all that processing, it ain't going to be a bean anymore.
Maybe it's like the cacao is like the super raw, and then the first couple of steps are the fermentation. So maybe it's after it's fermented, it's a cocoa bean.
Maybe, yeah. Because I did read something about the antioxidants and the anti-inflammatory properties of cacao that are lost as soon as it becomes a cocoa. So there's a lot of people that talk about just having the raw cacao because that's the healthier option. And I suppose that's moving a little further away from chocolate, because I don't think there's, any of the chocolate that will have high cacao content. It'll all be high cocoa content.
Yeah, probably.
And sort of some of the side effects of cacao as well mimic really closely to coffee. Yeah. So the jitteriness and the heart rate and things like that.
You're just one methyl group different, so
exactly
makes sense.
But it's a thing for me because I'm not a tea or coffee drinker. I'm an English person that doesn't drink tea, but more importantly, I don't drink coffee as well. So chocolate is basically my way of getting
a little pick me up. Yeah.
The 2 o'clock pick me up after lunch. I might have a little bit after this actually, because it's almost 3 o'clock here right now.
Oh, definitely time for afternoon chocolate.
Absolutely.
So I have one more question for you. Do you have a favorite scientist?
One of my favorites. He's a hero of mine because he's not only achieved a huge amount within his field, but he also, I think he might be the only person that's won a Nobel Prize and an Ig Nobel Prize. The Ig Nobel Prize is for, I don't know the actual definition, but it's basically doing something very funny and a bit stupid in science and publishing it.
Yeah.
And so my absolute hero is Professor Andre Geim at the university. I think he's still at the University of Manchester, right where I am now. So I'm hoping to bump into him at some point. But he was huge on graphene research and got his Nobel Prize for graphene research. But about a decade before, he won an Ig Nobel Prize for levitating a frog using magnetism.
All right. Yeah. Well, there you go.
He may well, and I'm pretty sure he's the only Nobel and Ig Nobel winner.
Probably. So that's awesome.
That's a glow up from winning an Ig Nobel for doing something odd as levitating a frog to winning.
Look, some days it's just long days in the lab, and you need a little bit of levity.
Too many frogs, and you just need to levitate them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And
it's wise words for all of us to
Nick, thank you so much. This has been really fun. I love chocolate, so I was really excited that when you chose this as the topic. Where can everybody find you and Acorn Scientific Marketing?
Well, you can find Acorn Scientific Marketing at acornscimarketing.com, and myself, Nick Gaunt, PhD on LinkedIn, or I think my Twitter handle, I barely use it anymore, but I think it's Dr. Nick Gaunt. So you can find me on Twitter, but it's
LinkedIn is probably best.
Yeah, LinkedIn for me, or track me down on my website.
Thank you again. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I've learned something today, and
same here. It's always a good day when you learn something. If you learned something new, please pass it on to a friend by sharing the podcast. And don't forget to click that subscription button. Nothing is more satisfying than a good click. LuxeSci Podcast is an Erevna Media production, produced by me, Dr. Lex. Audio engineer is Dr. Dimos, and our theme music is Harlequin Mood by Burdy. You can find us all over social media at LuxeSci Pod. Feel free to drop us a line. We always love to hear from you. Until next time.